The questions you should ask someone before taking their milk are the same questions you should ask someone before you sleep with them. That to me just sums it up. I think we can do a lot of things safely, and we just have to be smart about it, right?
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Birth Lounge podcast. All right, you guys know that we are big fans of breastfeeding, obviously. No judgment if you are choosing to formula feed or you choose to supplement with formula, but I don't think there is any question about breast milk being the best food for your baby. I've never made any ifs, ands, or buts about that. And one of the things I talk about often for a bridge for parents that want to breastfeed, but it's not necessarily working out for them for whatever reason. Maybe you do have true low supply. Maybe you don't have necessarily true low supply, but you aren't able to necessarily make as much as your baby is needing. Maybe going back to work has been super hard for you. Maybe breastfeeding has impacted your mental health. Honestly, I do not need to know why. You don't owe me any sort of justification, but I want to provide you with the resources, and one of those is donor milk. Now, in episode 222, hello, angel number 222, I had on my friend Sterling, who is a certified breastfeeding specialist, and we talked about donor milk. But something that commonly comes up in this conversation is the difficulties that people have getting connected to people in their community that can and will donate breast milk. How come? Well, because a lot of donated breast milk actually goes to milk banks, which then is prioritized for NICU babies, which is wonderful, and that is what we want. However, in order to donate to a milk bank, women have to meet very strict criteria. And so, what happens if you are someone who doesn't meet the criteria to be able to donate to breast milk? Maybe you're on a certain medication that is in fact safe for breastfeeding, but doesn't meet the criteria for the breast milk. Or maybe you have a surplus of breast milk, but not enough to donate to a milk bank. Yes, milk banks do make you have a certain amount of milk to be able to donate to them. And so if you fall below that, you're going to find yourself with a freezer full of extra breast milk and nowhere to donate it. Well, my guest today, Kelly Cox, is the founder of Share the Drop. It's actually an app that will connect donors to recipients in your area. I like to think about it as Bumble for breastfeeding. It's such a cool idea. As soon as I heard about Share the Drop, I knew I had to have Kelly on the show, not only to tell you more about donor milk, but also to help you understand how you can get connected to people in your area who either want milk or are giving milk. For me, donor milk is one of the unsung heroes of the mom community. This is one of the hidden gems because in America, we know there is such a lack of support when it comes to breastfeeding, which forces so many families to give up their dreams dreams and their goals of breastfeeding because they simply do not have the support and resources to be able to keep going. I think donor milk is such a great way to bridge that gap where families will still be able to meet their breastfeeding goals without having to feel the feelings of failure by giving up due to circumstances that were totally out of their control, i.e., living in a country that doesn't prioritize breastfeeding support. This is truly one of the coolest episodes we have ever done because it is such an example of how the community around you can absolutely rally to get you the support that you need. And I'm so excited to dive in. Without further ado, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to talk to you.
I'm thrilled to have you here. We've talked about breastfeeding a lot. We are a pro breastfeeding organization, but we also recognize that breastfeeding isn't necessarily for everybody. Some people can't, some people choose not to. There are so many factors, from lack of access to lack of support to literally anything, lifestyle change, mental health. There's so many things that impact the way that you feed your baby. And so I'm all about bringing different options to people. And I think that your app is so cool. And I'm so excited to dive into this and just really bring this access to people. I want to increase access. And so I think your app is just such an amazing tool to be able to do that. Before we dive into all the nitty gritty, I would love to hear from you two things. So let's start with the different ways that people can access breast milk if feeding your baby from your body is not an option for you for whatever reason. We don't need your justification. We don't need your reasoning, but for whatever reason, it's not an option. And then I assume from that, your story of how your app came about will probably come about. But if it doesn't, we'd love to know how your app became like an idea to reality.
Yep. Thank you. I love the app too. I think it's the greatest thing I've ever thought about.
But not biased at all, obviously.
There are two ways to get breast milk if you can't produce enough. So you can go through, we have 33 formal milk banks in the country.
Okay.
And milk, you can donate through those. Very stringent screening process. It can take a while, but the babies in the NICU desperately need help. That is the way that they survive. So certainly if you're a major overproducer, contact your local milk bank and start that process. The other option is peer-to-peer or informal milk sharing, where you literally, if you have excess that maybe you could help your neighbor feed their child, that's where informal networks come in. So first of all, you can also sometimes buy milk from the milk banks, but it's very expensive. So if your baby is in the NICU and receives milk, you might have a better chance of buying the excess, but it just becomes price prohibitive, if you will. So I owned a pre and postnatal yoga studio for a decade. So I'm a former therapist. I like to say I'm a therapist in recovery. I worked with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, which I loved, and I loved the work, but I felt like the systems that we were interacting with just weren't helpful. And I didn't feel like I was helping enough. So I quit that work, and I had just started my personal yoga practice and literally would not stop talking about it. Tell everyone, you have to do yoga, right? So one of my best friends was teaching second grade, and we started talking about how would our lives be different if we had started yoga when we were in our 20s? What if we did it when we were teenagers? Or what if we did it when we were kids? So two very smart women who had a lot of education experience behind them opened a yoga studio just for children, which sounds just like such a sweet idea. It's the worst idea any two women have ever had, because if you have kids, there's swimming, tennis, horseback riding, lacrosse, soccer. They didn't have time to come. And people in the community kept saying, hey, Kelly, you should really teach prenatal yoga. I have never considered having a baby. It literally just never was an idea in my head. And so my first thought was, I don't know if I like pregnant women, and I don't know if this is what I want to do. But people just kept asking for it. So I was like, okay. So I went to one training and I was like, okay. Anyways, I took several trainings and I finally fell in love with it. And I've been teaching prenatal yoga for 17 years now. And then people in the community as well, another doula was saying, you should really become a doula. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know. Like, I have zero interest and I have even less time. And I went to go watch one of my best friends deliver her baby. And I was like, now I have to be a
Changed
doula.
your life. Changed your life.
I was just meeting with a couple last night, and I said to the partner, I said, if your wife leaves the hospital after having a baby and she doesn't feel like a total badass, everyone in that room has failed. Coolest thing I've ever seen. And away from the physiological, how a baby turns and all that stuff. It's more this like very intimate thing that people do one, two, three times in life. And I get to see it. And to me, there's not a baby coming. There's a whole other soul that now this family is going to evolve. And it's just, and I'm like, let me be a part of this. It's amazing. So teaching prenatal yoga, being a doula, former therapist, I was always had this hat on about what's going on mental health wise. Is there infertility, loss, just anxiety about being a parent, returning to work, how your relationships are going to change. So I was always being like in the background. I can teach prenatal yoga. It's super easy, right? I feel like I've mastered it by this point. But it was all the other things that these moms needed that I started paying attention to. So I had the studio for a decade, and we had a lactation consultant come in every single Friday for 8 years for a community-led, free to anyone lactation support group. People, they would be so packed that I had this studio, these big glass windows, and we were on like a pedestrian mall, and people would come in and be like, do you sell strollers? No, it was just packed. And what I started hearing was how much stress and anxiety comes from how you're going to feed your baby, and guilt if it doesn't work. And it's like the whole reason you have breasts is to breastfeed. It's the most natural thing you're going to do. And of course, we know that is not always the case. And so I would have moms, I'd always be sending them to different lactation supports. But then they started coming to me and saying, I have so much milk, I feel guilty not giving it away. Or people would say, I'm struggling with my supply. Where can I get milk? So I was constantly sending them to Facebook groups. So very popular Facebook groups. But every time they would come back and say, this is so time consuming and clunky because you have to find your local chapter, wait to be admitted, and then it's all forum based. Nothing good comes out of a forum based because I go on and post at 6 a.m. Hey, I have 200 ounces to donate. And then you come on and post after me. And it's just people were just like ships passing each other in the night. And so I started just linking people up and, hey, Diane has 500 ounces of milk and Susie needs it, right? So I just became this like little milk broker. And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh.
And I would have preferred to just quietly step back and deal with it on my own. But everyone in the community was like, no, you are the woman who is telling women how resilient their bodies are, that scars are beautiful, that they can get through anything. And so I became very public about it. And at that point, I was flocked with other survivors saying, oh my gosh, I won't be able to produce milk. How can I get milk for my baby? And I was like, I don't know, but I'll get it for you. Don't worry, I'll get it for you. And so here's the real origin story of Share the Drop. I had a super long day at the studio. I taught, I think, 3 classes. I had a workshop. I got home about 9 p.m. I poured myself a glass of wine and it was like, Kelly, don't open your laptop. But I did. And there was an email there from a woman saying, I have so much frozen breast milk and we're about to move. And there's no way my husband is going to let me transport this. Who do you have? And literally the email right underneath that was from a client. And these clients I knew very well. They lived a couple miles apart. She was pregnant with her 4th. She had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I have to have a mastectomy as soon as this baby's out. And she's like, I really want breast milk. And literally, I was emailing them an email introduction. And my phone went off with a notification from Bumble that I had a match. And he was 10 miles away. And that moment, I was like, wait a second. Why am I sending these women to go to these Facebook groups? And it's just so time, and they're doing great work, but it's just so time consuming when I just made a profile of like my perfect match. It could have been a milk match, but it was my match from this guy in my own community. And I got a notification instantly. So that's where Share the Drop came to be. And then we closed during a decade during the pandemic. And I felt a lot of guilt and still do about taking that resource from the community. But it had been a decade and we didn't know what was happening with vaccines. And so we closed and pivoted, and I sold my house for the first build. I am in it. This is what I do full time. I really believe that one, everyone should have access to breast milk if they want. So all women, but breast cancer survivors, same-sex couples, people who adopt, use a surrogate, grandparents raising grandbabies, right? This should be an option. I am not anti-formula whatsoever. Breastfeed, formula, donor milk. It should just be a three-part equal conversation. So yeah, that's how it came to be and why I've done this. It's so funny because people are like, wait a second, you teach prenatal yoga, you're a doula, and now you're like slinging milk and you've never had a baby. I'm like, no. It's just people are like, how did this come to be? Because I just let my life unfold and it brought me all these great gifts. And now I spend my days with pregnant women and babies and joy and sadness and all the stuff that comes along with it. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
me. How this all came to be.
The milk slinger. Oh my God, I love it so much. I too am childless, but it's kind of a choice, but that's not my long-term plan. We'll have babies eventually. That is our plan. But I feel like being childless has made me a better doula. I feel like it has given me the freedom to really pour into 100%. I can give my all to these families, and then I get to come home and totally pour into myself and replenish myself, and I get to show up 100% the next day. Not to say that moms can't do that. It's just a little bit harder when you come home and you don't have the reprieve of having a quiet home and a partner that cooks for you and, 10 hours of sleep at night. When you have littles at home, or you're trying to be the manager of a home, it can be really hard to ever feel like you're 100% replenished yourself. And it's something that I took for granted for a really long time because I just didn't understand it. But the closer that we get to having our own babies, I am grieving a little bit that chapter in my life because I know it's coming to a close and I know it's going to impact the way that I show up for people. But I think that's so cool. I think it's really cool when people like you and I who don't have our own families have dedicated our whole life to other families. We just get to serve you in a different way, and it's such a good I just feel so honored. I could cry right now just thinking about what an honor it really is to show up for these families. Okay, I have a question about the 33 milk banks. That's clearly not a milk bank per state. So it also doesn't even feel like enough. One per state still doesn't feel like enough. Tell us about the lack of access to milk banks and how that maybe impacts things, because I assume that would probably make things pretty hard. If you're in a state that doesn't have a milk bank, how does that work? What do we need to know about there not really being that much access? Decent, moderate access, but not great access. Not what you would think a country like the US would have.
I think they actually have a pretty smooth system. So even if you live far away, like another state, you can do all like your medical lab work where you are. And then
Okay.
to donate and ship the milk that is all covered and paid for. So they do make the process pretty easy. However, the process to onboard, from my understanding, and I've never donated to a formal milk bank, it can take 30 to 45 days. They're very stringent, as they should be. I've had people who said they were on a specific medication that they just couldn't accept. But that was safe for babies to have, but because of their very strict rules, they couldn't do that. If I think if someone's had a surgery within the last 6 months, you're not able to donate. So there are very strict rules. So those are more the barriers. But I understand because these babies in the NICU, everything has to be solid across the board. I do think we should have a milk bank in every major metropolitan area, because if we did and we had people donating, there would be excess for everyone else to have it, right? But I want to safeguard those tiny babies because they need milk. I do believe you have to have at least 200 ounces in the beginning to make an initial donation, and that's not what everyone has. So thinking about peer to peer, you literally might just have enough to help a neighbor, to help two neighbors. And in the beginning, people were talking, I was trying to get investors, and they were talking about what's going to keep someone on the app. If a woman gets on or a man gets on and finds one donor, then why would they just go off? And wouldn't they just go off the app? realistically, you're going to need, if your baby needs to be full-time fed, you're going to need 2 or 3 donors because you might have someone who can give you 50 ounces a week, and then the woman across the street can give you 40. You could have one very strong donor who then goes on vacation for 2 weeks or gets sick and has to take a medication and her supply plummets. And it's interesting, I was talking to a fertility doctor about this, and he was talking about antibodies. And he said, if you have a baby that's getting antibodies from one donor, just getting that donor's antibodies, if they're getting milk from 3 or 4 donors, that's 3 or 4 times the antibodies that these little babies are getting. And I don't know why that didn't occur to me, but I was like, yeah, what a great gift. I have a friend who has an 8-year-old, and then they were trying a lot of ways to have another baby. And it turned out that she had breast cancer. And so they have just now gone through the surrogacy process, which took a long time and was not the easiest process for them, but they have a baby via surrogate, and he is currently being fed by 6 local donors. And he was born about 4 weeks early in November. And of course, his older sister is in school and it's not all the time and germs. That little baby has not had one little sniffle of anything. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. It's just, it's just such a gift, right? If you had excess, why wouldn't you give it to your neighbor? So the other main mission of Share the Drop is community. I'm a vast believer in community. It is just, we talk about it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise the village, and the village has to stay in village mentality all the time. So Share the Drop, when you create an account, you use your zip code because I want it to be hyper local for 2 reasons. We don't need to go through the time and expense of shipping milk. That is so expensive, and it's just a barrier for use. But also, I want you to go meet your neighbors. And then you're like, oh, who's your pediatrician? Oh, did you take prenatal yoga? And then you build these little armies of parental support. Because we used to live in community with aunties, grannies, sisters, and we all help each other. And we just, especially during COVID, we just don't do that anymore. And so I think from my 17 years in this work, the very best thing for any new family is community. So that's really my mission. Get to know your neighbors and then build up. Like when I had my yoga studio, it was just, I just had coffee this morning with 2 women who met at my studio, and they have a business together. But it's that whole, how do you get to know the person on your mat? And then I'm obsessed with yoga. I've been going to the same studio for 20 years. But it's just, where do you feel at home? And I feel at home when I meet people on my same level who are going through the same things. Like I go to some breast cancer survivor stuff, and that even though I'm so far out of it, I go to mentor the newly diagnosed people, but also because it's just the people that get you. And so when you are in that first couple months postpartum, you need other people who are in that period too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every family should have access to donor milk if that's what they want to feed their infant, and every family needs more and more community.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Okay, I can feel some people clutching their pearls at the thought of, oh my God, I'm gonna get stranger's milk and give it to my baby. Talk us through A, those feelings, and B, what are we doing to keep our family safe? There's obviously medical oversight with the app. So, what does that screening process look like on an individual level, on a peer-to-peer level? Is this something that the app does for you? Is it something that once you are paired with someone, you are asking specific questions? I assume every family has something, has different things that are important to them, like someone who is on a medication, a prescription medication, not illicit drugs, but prescription medication that is safe to breastfeed but doesn't quite meet the criteria for a milk bank. Alcohol, people feel differently about alcohol. Some people care, some people don't. Diet, some people want this, some people vaccines. There's so many things that are important to people. How are we doing this through the app or once we're connected with people?
So when you onboard, both recipients and donors have to agree to all of our terms of use. And one of those is you don't have any transmittable diseases that could be passed through breast milk.
Okay.
All the waivers are ironclad. We as a company, I say we, it's just me. I'm just the entire C-suite, but
Same.
not we do not get involved with matches. We do not store milk. We don't touch it. We don't ship it ever. So it's all informed consent. So when you onboard, you agree to all of those, and then we ask the number one safety feature I have, and I will. This is the hill I will die on. We do not pay for donor milk, nor should anyone pay for donor milk. If you're buying it from the milk bank, that's different. But I very much appreciate the time and energy it takes to pump, sterilize all your parts, store the milk. But the moment we open it up to monetizing it, people could sell you anything. They could sell you breast milk that's watered down. They could sell you non-fat milk that's watered down. And that's where babies get sick and die. So I constantly go through the app and make sure that no one's doing that. I have a report button that is built into the app where anyone can hit that button and write to me. It goes directly to me. I get it instantly. We ask donors upon onboarding if any woman who's lactating has recent lab work. If any recipient asks you to see any recent medical lab work, are you willing to share that? It's never uploaded, clearly because of HIPAA. But if they agree to that, we do put a little like medical icon on their profile. So recipients know that's one more thing to ask. You create an account. How old is your baby? What's your diet like? Do you drink alcohol? Do you consume caffeine? Are you on any medications? And so that's all there. So that when a recipient finds you, let's have a conversation about what is your alcohol intake? What is your caffeine intake? So those are some of the safety measures. We give a lot. We have branded guidelines on our website about the questions asked milk donors. We give information about how to meet, don't meet at someone's house at night, meet in the park, tell someone where you're going. But really the idea is going back to this date your donor. It's where my idea came from. Like I understand there are sites where you could match and meet your perfect person and hook up that night, right? I'm not going to do that. I know it happens. When I was doing online dating, which I'll never do again, it was a lot of conversation before I met. And then I was like, we're going to meet in the park at noon. But it's the same thing as like getting into an Uber, renting an Airbnb. Like it's all, you have to do your own informed consent. I talk about this, your education and making informed decisions. I talk about this as a doula. It is not, I am not deciding if someone's getting an epidural. I'm not deciding if they're going to give their babies vaccines after. I can help give them all the resources, and then I support their informed choices. We give information about home pasteurization, or I talk about you can buy testing strips for alcohol, right? So it is as safe as you want it to be. So I have one of my advisors in the early days, he's a neonatologist. He said to me, Kelly, the questions you should ask someone before taking their milk are the same questions you should ask someone before you sleep with them. That to me just sums it up. I think we can do a lot of things safely, and we just have to be smart about it, right? And so the other idea about having it like hyper local is I want you to be like, oh, you went to prenatal yoga at this studio? Oh, so did I. Do you know this person? And then I'm like, oh, she knows my friend Sally. I'm getting on the phone with Sally. I'm like, I just met this donor. Talk about it. Who are you talking to? How do you know them? Or our kids go to the same preschool. Who knew? And then you ask people at the preschool, hey, what do you think about Sally? I'm going to take her breast milk. The other thing I really like to put out there is if you are a donor, if I'm at a donor and their baby is gaining weight and meeting developmental milestones off that breast milk, I should feel pretty good that my baby will do the same. And like the first time you meet with your babies, I'd want to go see some chubby baby with these rolls and be like, that's what my baby needs. So that's how we keep it safe. And I think I love what the formal milk banks do, but it's just not an option for everyone. And yeah, take care of your neighbor, right? We talk to our doula clients about meal trains. And so people are always willing to help and they just want to support new families. How do I know what she's putting in the casserole she's bringing over, right? You vet your people and you trust them.
Yeah, I love Date Your Donor. I love that so much. And then those people might even become your friends. What if you meet somebody who now has a baby that's similar age as yours and your kids grow up together and maybe they marry each other. Maybe they're in each other's weddings. Maybe you guys are just like lifelong friends. That is the coolest thing. Okay, take us through step by step what it's like to be in the app. So you go to your app store, you download it, you put in your name and your email address, and then what? You're filling out the forms. What does it look like from there?
So we are not on the app stores.
Oh, okay.
Apple and Google take 30%.
Right. I know. I have an app.
We have a web app. So it works just as sophisticated and savvy as any other app. So you go directly to our website, which is share the,
Okay.
and you create an account right there. And then you choose whether you're a donor or recipient. You have to read all of our terms of use. There's no charge to create an account, but you agree to all of our terms and use. You go through and you make your profile. And then because profiles are built off that zip code, you will immediately see who is in your feed. So you can set parameters. I'll go 20 miles from my zip code, right? So you'll see everyone within 20 miles of your zip code. Donors never pay anything to be on the app. Recipients can create an account for free. And once they see donors in their area that they want to start messaging and matching with, they pay a $19.99 subscription fee every month. I waive that fee if they're WIC or SNAP eligible. And then they have unlimited access to donor base and messaging. Also, if you're traveling, you can just go into your profile and change your zip code. So you can try to get where you are. And then it's really up to you. So it's talking on the app, figuring out where to meet. I do have perimeters set so that if donors or recipients have not been active on the app for 3 months, they deactivate so they don't show up in your feed. As soon as they sign on again, they'll show up. But I didn't want it to be this burdensome process of reaching out to 30 donors who might not be donating again, right? So one mom might donate for 9 months and then stop, and then a year later come back because she's had another baby or excess. So I'm trying to make it as clean as possible. And I didn't want anyone to have to pay that subscription fee if they didn't have donors in their area, because we are still growing. And so not everywhere will you find someone. But I talk about just create an account and then keep going back and seeing if there's new donors.
And can you widen your area? So let's say I am in rural, so I grew up in Mississippi. Let's say I'm in rural Mississippi and there's no one 15 minutes from me and there's no one 30 minutes from me. Can I check out an hour? Can I check out 90 minutes? Can I check out 2 hours away? As long as I'm willing to drive and they're willing to go, we can expand that surface area as much as we want. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do it all based on mileage and
Yep.
so if you, I think the top one is 20 miles plus, and so then it would show you anyone else.
Nice.
Yeah.
My gosh, I love that. Okay, are there any, and this just is like this is just a question I have because I'm always, as a business owner, I'm just always thinking about this. Are there any legal or liability issues with being a donor if someone were to ever come back and say anything? This made my baby sick. My baby screened now for this disease or chronic condition. Could it have been from donor milk? Talk us through that kind of thing.
I was very worried about that upon the creation.
Okay.
I had very good lawyers who helped with all that.
Mm.
On those waivers, everything's covered. So you are not, no one can come back to you in any way. This is peer to peer, make your own decisions. We have everything covered. So you cannot proceed through that onboarding process until you have agreed to all those. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
so it's totally you're free to donate and being a recipient, footloose and fancy free.
yeah.
Cool. I like it. Okay, this kind of reminds me of the idea of how we all make birth plans and we even make postpartum plans, but very rarely we do it with our clients, but that's not the norm. What about feeding plans? It's something that so many people just think, yeah, I'll just breastfeed or yeah, we'll just feed our baby and it's okay, but how are you going to feed your baby? And they're like with breast milk or formula and you're like, okay, but we need to think a little bit deeper than this. Talk to us about feeding plans and why they are so important.
I love that you brought this up. I talk about this till I am blue in the face. I remind my doula clients labor and delivery is the sprint.
Mm.
Care and feeding is the marathon. We spend 9 months sometimes on our birthing plan and we do so much research. And then we talk to our doula about it. We talk to our care professional about it. That's great. Don't stop making birthing plans. You learn a lot through that process. But yes, you're right. Absolutely. We need to be talking about feeding plans. I tell my doula clients, go find out in your community who has a breastfeeding support group. Go sit in there and listen while you're pregnant. Because you never know when you're at home night three with that baby, you might remember, oh, that woman in that group tried this. I'll try this. If there's a Lily Chait meeting in your community, go while you're pregnant. Take any class on breastfeeding you possibly can and My biggest recommendation is do research in your area about IBCLCs, who's available, ask friends for recommendations. And also, it's like with your doula, like not everyone is going to jive with our personality. You have to find the providers that you align with, but go have a prenatal consultation. Night two, when you're home with that baby and you're worried about they're getting enough, you already have some information and you already have a phone number you could reach out to immediately. Because you can't, you're sleep deprived, you're everything when your anxiety, I have this new baby, I gotta keep it alive. So do as much work prenatally about that first year postpartum. And we talk about feeding plans, mental health plans.
Mm.
I love meal trains, but I'm also like, let's set really specific parameters. When I was going through cancer treatment, I had a few people who were really sweet, would drop off. First of all, I'm just one person, so they're dropping off way too much food, right? I need, and I changed my meal plan. No, very small for smoothies, things like that. Anyways, there were a couple people who kept sending food, like leaving it on my porch in like fancy containers. And I was like, and then I had to figure out remember who it was, and then returning it. I was like, I always tell clients, here's the thing about meal trains. Everyone wants to help. And then you might get Susie, who has worked with your partner for the last 6 months, and she's going to bring her world famous chili, and she's going to want to come in and hold the baby, and you might have not showered in a couple of days. You might still be wearing a diaper. So I'm like, put a cooler on the front porch with a lovely note. We are so thrilled. We can't wait for you to meet baby Sam, whatever. I went off on a tangent. I don't remember what we're talking about, but plan those things out too. What is your life going to be like? Who do you have? Is it summer and you need someone to come mow your lawn? Do you need someone to come walk the dogs? Maybe you've just had, I call it abdominal birth, right? Major surgery to meet your baby. Does someone need to walk your dogs for you? Like those kinds of general things that maybe you wouldn't think about, but how could your life be as simple as possible in those first 6 months, because you're learning so much and everything's changing. And feeding plans are, I think, the most important part of that.
It goes back to that community, right? So you have a birth plan, a postpartum plan, a feeding plan. You almost have a community support plan. Who are the dog walkers? Who are the IBCLCs? Where are the mommy groups? And what days are they on? And who are the facilitators? And what organizations have drop-in feeding classes? There's so many things that you learn about your community that you never knew, but not to your fault. It's like you didn't, why would you have looked up an IBCLC before you were pregnant? It's just community resources that you didn't know were available that are going to be so pivotal when you have a baby that you can go ahead and look up beforehand. So when you're in those moments of, oh shit, I've really got to get out of the house. I hadn't left the house in 4 weeks. You already have something in your phone or in your email or print it out or on your fridge that you can just scan down and go, oh, good. Okay, there is a group that starts every 6 weeks. It looks like this is a start date. I'm going to join next week and start going. That's awesome. Okay, my next question. Oh, yeah, no, go for it. Go for it.
You're in prenatal class and you get to know the woman next to you and you're due around the same time. Tell her about them and say, we're going to make a pact that we're going to meet when the babies are 4 weeks old. We're going to meet here, because you also need that buddy system, right? And then it's someone who's specifically in that same stage of life, and plan out postpartum with them too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it so freaking much. Okay, my next question is about healthcare providers and how this is received by the majority. And look, my community is very well versed in the fact that not all providers are created equal and that some are going to be super eager and open and some are going to be absolute jerks about it and say, oh my God, you can't take breast milk from a stranger, like, rah, rah, rah. In general, how are healthcare professionals responding to this? And is this a topic that is safe for women to bring to their providers? Or would you say this is something that women typically face a lot of pushback from or with? And so maybe they should consider if they want to bring it to their provider or not.
First of all, I think if you have a provider that you don't feel safe bringing up anything with, you need a new provider.
Same.
Or have a provider that even if they don't know, they know exactly who to send you to. So I'll tell you, I get the biggest pushback from pediatricians, some IBCLCs, but not many. It's again like person specific, but it's the same as I talk a lot about practicing within scope. I am not a lactation counselor. I'm not. So when my plants need help, I send them to an IBCLC. When they need pelvic floor work, I'm not sending them to a chiropractor or their GP. I'm sending them to a pelvic floor specialist. Yeah, I think talking to your providers about this before. So again, it's that prenatal plan. And if you have a provider that isn't on board, talk to someone else.
Yeah.
I do get some pushback, like we talked about like, why are you asking people to donate informally when they could send it to the milk bank? You can. I don't have to be, not everyone has to be on board with this. Not everyone has to think it's a good idea. I just want it to be available. But I do think I've worked really hard to make it safe. And I talk about safety a lot. And most providers who are like, "Oh, we don't know about this," as soon as they find out we're not paying for donor milk and that I've gone through all the legal stuff, then they seem to be more on board. I had a major kind of player in the IBCLC world here that in the beginning was like, no, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Because when we first started the app, we had, do you need milk? Do you have milk? And then referrals, because we were like, maybe doulas could get on. And she was like, nope, if it's not peer to peer, those two are the only people involved making all the decisions. I can't get behind it. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. So even I was talking about my friend here who is getting milk from the app. I made her go on before and I was like, you have to plan this out and find people. Then the baby came early. And so she called me that morning. She's like, can you go on the app and just talk to someone? I said, no, I can't. I said, that's not the way it works. It has to be through you. So she did that. And in a matter of an hour, she found a donor and she was like, will you go pick the milk up for me? I was like, absolutely.
Oh, you said yes.
I picked it up for her, but I didn't do any of they have to they have to do their own due diligence and talk. And she was like, I feel really good about this. And so I said, okay. And so I picked it up for her. That's fine. Like if anyone on the app meets someone, but you're like, have your spouse go pick up the milk or your sister, that's fine. But I knocked on the door of this house and the woman opened it. And I was like, oh, she was a woman who had just been in my prenatal class and then postnatal yoga class. And I said, I didn't know you were on the app. And she told me this story about how she had just had her third child, but her second child had a form of cancer, and the only food that he could tolerate was donor milk. And so she received quite a bit of donor milk. That baby did pass away, but she was an overproducer with her next one. She was like, I just wanted to feed it forward. And that was just so beautiful to me because I have other friends who are on the app, but they're not telling me they're on the app. I just know because I see things come through. But I love finding out that just like someone in my yoga class heard about it and started donating milk. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. I have a thought about the professionals who are like, why are you not donating to the milk bank? And I share in the thought that you share in, if you can, then that should be your first step. But what about that person that only has 120 ounces and they don't meet the 200 and they are on the medication? It is safe for a baby, but they can't donate to the milk bank. Their baby's not going to drink it. You're literally wasting milk. There's a whole subset of people who could serve others and are wanting to. They're literally seeking out options, opportunities to serve other families. But if we don't have a method for them to do that, then the assumption is that their breast milk just gets poured down the drain. Their baby's not going to drink it. They can't donate to a milk bank. This is the way that you get people connected to breast milk. And I think a lot about the families who can't afford to pay for milk, but they so desperately want to give their baby breast milk. And to be able to take donor milk would remove that financial strain of having to pay formula prices to feed their baby. There's a ton of benefits. Everything comes with risk and benefits. And I hear the risk. And if you're out there listening, being like, I would never, I respect that. I totally do. There are millions of families out there who absolutely would and would be totally open to it. I just put up a story on my Instagram recently, which by the time this airs, you guys, it'll be quite a couple scrolls back. But I put up a story of when I was running new moms groups, and I think about the story literally on a weekly basis. On the opening day of new moms group, we always went around in a circle and everyone told their birth story as much or as little as you wanted. And there's always traumatic stories that happen And this mom tells about, and this has nothing to do with donor milk. I'm just saying, I'll follow it up with another, with the point, I promise. This mom tells us that her pregnancy was great and her birth was awesome. And the trauma actually came in postpartum. And I was like, oh no, what happened? Postpartum hemorrhage, baby had a NICU stay. What's going on? And she tells the story that her baby literally got mixed up in the hospital. Yes, she's breastfeeding this baby. She looks down and this is not my baby. And she calls her husband over. She's, honey, is this our baby? And he's, no, that is definitely not our baby. They call the nurse, and the nurse is, oh my God, this is not your baby. And everyone in the room was floored. I was floored. I was shook to my core. Not, though, for the reason that she was feeding someone else's baby. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that. Oh, that's not what I was bothered by. I was bothered by the fact that other family didn't consent to it. They didn't know about it. And the hospital had made an easy yet inexcusable mistake. And so in the comments, I had said that a couple of times, and people, there are differing opinions in the comments under that video, but I was not taken aback at all that she had fed someone else's baby. Not at all. That I didn't never even cross my mind. Like, oh my God, she fed somebody else. It was more so, oh my goodness, she fed someone else's baby without their consent. And it wasn't the mom's fault. That wasn't the mom's fault. That was the hospital's fault. But I think that we somehow, and I'm 34, it's not ever been normalized in my life. But it used to be super normal to feed other people's babies.
And
Like
doing
very normal. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so two examples I have when we launched summer of 2022. I remember the war in Ukraine was going when they first started, and we were getting all this messaging. Please stop sending us formula. We don't have clean water. So yes. So what do you think was happening with those babies that needed milk? The other women in the village were feeding them.
Wow.
Last summer, when Hurricane Helene came through Western North Carolina,
Mhm.
I'm waiving all fees. So we have a situation where there's no power, there's no clean water, but there were hardly any roads that would get into the Asheville area. And so how were the grocery stores being stocked with formula? And I just immediately was like, I will waive all my user fees for anyone seeking milk because the only option was donor
Donor.
milk. If you, and there were formula companies that were shipping pallets to them, but you're like, they can't use it. And of course, you could do ready-made formula, but just then that's cost prohibitive because it's heavy, right? And so during times of crisis, this is exactly what we need for families. I would love to think that there's no more major hurricanes and no more wildfires, but of course there will be. So anytime people are plagued with no clean water, formula is not an option. Wet nursing, we look at the levels of do Black women breastfeed as much as white women? No. A lot of that is just lack of access, but also in education. But it goes back to the days of slavery when Black mothers had to feed their master's children, and that would take up their supply. And then who knew what their babies were getting? There are reasons that it's not as widespread throughout that community. I totally get that. But we're doing wet nursing literally forever. It's the way that civilization has survived. Breast milk is the reason that babies have survived.
Yeah. There was years ago, maybe one of the listeners knows. I couldn't even begin to try and think about what the profile was, but I saw a pair of sisters, and one of them actually, it might have been breast cancer. I can't remember exactly what she was doing, but she was going through some sort of medical treatment. And I ended up seeing the profile when she was in surgery, and the other sister was feeding her baby for her. And it was just like so touching. I mean, I'm could cry right now. It was so touching. Wow, what a special gift that you gave to your sister, and then for the sister going through the medical treatment, like just how special to know that your baby was taken care of, and your baby's lifestyle didn't have to have major shifts, little shifts for sure, being fed by her aunt rather than mom, but she didn't have to change her entire diet from breastfeeding breast milk to formula. And I just think that is So special. It's so cool. This is amazing. Oh my gosh. I love what you have built here. Okay, I feel like I have a good handle on things. I feel like you've covered everything. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you want people to know, or anything that people should know, or something that is on your heart that you want to share today?
I get asked a lot about why would women donate milk if they weren't getting paid? First of all, my answer is always
Love.
because
Because women are caregivers, because we're natural, just like caring people.
basic answer, but there are a handful of women who throughout my work the last 15 years who have been the basis of doing this. One in particular was a woman who was pregnant. She had an older child, I think maybe like 11. She had a new relationship, she's pregnant again, and she ended up having stillborn at 38 weeks. And
Oh,
she decided as part of her healing process that she wanted to donate that child's milk for 6 months. And she donated through a milk bank here in Virginia and also to a local breast cancer survivor that I hooked her up with. And she did that, pumped and drove to deliver milk for 6 months because that was her healing process. And she got to honor that child's life. Those stories all the time. All the time I get them. Um, yeah, so a woman who was like her cousin had a brand newborn and she was going through treatment for pancreatic cancer, and the woman was like, I'll just drop off milk every single day, and that's what they did. So we also think about it's not necessarily some woman, maybe the sister was actually putting that her niece or nephew on her chest, but it's also like you have milk in your freezer, you get to bottle feed it. You still get to feed your child. You can still have that skin to skin. You can still have that connection, and you're feeding them what you think is the best food ever.
yeah. Yeah.
We call it liquid gold. It's liquid gold. You can't replace it. And I just think it should be talked about as an option more.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that anyone can argue that breast milk is superior. It is made for babies. That doesn't negate the fact that formula feeding is also okay and totally safe and a very valid option. But if we have to say which is the best versus which is the second best, it is very clear that breast milk is the best. It just is. And that, again, I'm not invalidating formula feeding. It's a super, super safe and very good option for people if that is okay with you and that's something that you want to do. But if you don't have the option to breastfeed your baby and you are still looking to give them breast milk, I think that your app is such an amazing way to do that. I also think that there's something about just be in that community, because the community, that village is disappearing right before our eyes. There's just something innately feminine about staying connected with other families and being able to provide for other families in a way that a man could never, in a way that other people might not ever want to. It's truly like a very special gift to be able to give other babies the chance to have breast milk. And I love it so much. So truly, thank you so much for being here. If people wanted to learn more from you, if they wanted to connect with you online or social media, if they wanted to join your app, how and where can they do all of that?
First stop, sharethedrop.com. You can find out all information there. You can sign up for our newsletter and you can create an app or an account right there. On all social media, I'm at Share the Drop. DM me, ask me anything. You can email me. It's kelly@sharethedrop.com. I love feedback, even if it's, I think this is the worst thing ever. Have you ever thought about this? I have very thick skin. Send me any questions you have. Send me concerns, ask me questions. I'm Kelly Cox on LinkedIn. I mean, you at Share the Drop, just follow, share it. I need as many eyes on this as possible.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Kelly, truly. Thanks for being here. All right, you guys. Again, if you are looking for a way to get your baby breast milk, but breastfeeding is not part of your journey for whatever reason, and I do not need your reason, you can share the drop and you can be a recipient of Share the Drop. So I'll see you guys in the next episode. Be sure to follow Share the Drop on social media, and you can find me at Tranquility by HeHe and at the.birth.lounge. Until next time, head to your app store and download the Birth Lounge app for evidence-based childbirth education and data-driven postpartum support delivered straight to your phone. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I love hanging out with you, and it is an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and tell others why they should be listening to the Birth Lounge podcast too. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent without all the trauma that you so commonly hear about on social media. New episodes air every Wednesday and Friday. Hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. I'm HeHe, and this is the Birth Lounge Podcast.